Hello, everyone. Today we're really fortunate to be speaking with Ebtihal Shedid. Shedid is a self-taught Egyptian photographer who is based in San Francisco, who earned her MFA from California College of the Arts. Her work explores intersections of photography, sculpture, collage, and installation. Shedid comes from a background of linguistics, translation, and intercultural communication, and is interested in topics surrounding how language shapes the way we see and interprets ideas such as storytelling, belonging, and attachment. Ebti, it's so good to be with you. Thank you for
Hey, Roula. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's get right into the questions. The first question is, what are the major themes in your creative practice?
Well, as the bio says, I think the biggest the biggest influence in my work that shows in ways that maybe are not that direct is language, the different languages that I speak. I am personally still trying to figure out how it's showing in the work, but I know that's what's, making the work. But it's mostly thinking about home and belonging, longing in belonging. Been recently thinking about portability of home, like printing on fabric that can be like made so small and just put in a bag. So really it's also just thinking about how do you make a home, like in the sense where home is not a geographical location anymore. How, like literally like a recipe almost, like how do you cook a home? So yeah.
Do you work through this idea both as a translator, someone who's interested in linguistics and photographically? So graphically in terms of language and photographically, like do those two sort of collide in that search for or trying to understand what home is or how home is defined?
I guess so. Like, I think, like, when in photography, you talk a lot about developing your own visual language, and just the language gets me, right? So there is a language there. And like in school, I've been told that I'm dealing with photographs the way language or sentences. And again, I'm personally trying to kind of see it, like you don't often see what's in your work more like people outside, but I deal with them as related. I'm not sure if it's showing, but I think at this point, I'm not even thinking about it. Like I come from a 10-year career of translation, like this has been my whole life until I started teaching myself photography and then doing my MFA. So yeah. I think I'm in the middle of kind of detangling exactly what this means.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that there's something powerful that you have just mentioned, and also that comes through in your work, which is the how experience is translated both through language and through photographs, and understanding that both are imperfect media through which to convey or define personal experience or collective experience. And so
right.
There's an engagement there with you're engaged in two forms that are maybe the best we have as human beings, the best that we can find, but also that like it's a constant, it seems like you work like right at the edge of that constant stage of discovery and investigation. And in that space, there is also that happens through translation. And even as a photographer, like constantly trying to translate what you're seeing, but that it, as you mentioned, like you're not sure if that's coming through in the images. So that like constantly living on that edge of trying to, or seeking that edge of capturing is it's a beautiful space to inhabit, I imagine, but also it could be very trying at times as well.
Yeah, I guess my way of dealing with it at this point is I just do it, like I learned how to, like, okay, this isn't how is this showing in your work? And I'm like, okay, I know it's not showing. Like when I say language, people expect to see language in my work, writing on picture, like, there's so many ways that I could have been having language in my work more clearly, but I don't. And I try not to stress about it because it's actually kind of stressful, because it's like, I want to see it and I'm like, okay, I can't. So I'm just doing it and I'm just acknowledging the fact that it's there somehow, and I'm restless anyway. So I just keep shifting and looking and kind of going with what's coming my way.
There's something about the language can describe or define the ephemeral, which is, or the ineffable, that is art or experience, is that artists have been trying to do this for literally thousands of years. That it's a constant state, which is really, it's beautiful. And that I like that 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 the word, that it's in there, but that it might not necessarily be visible to all of us as audiences. But that you give us little hints about there is something there. There is something you might find it. And it's that, again, leaves us in that striving state, which is really lovely. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So you come to the Bay Area from Egypt. How long have you been in the United States and California?
United States, 10 years, 9 years, 10 years next year, and Bay Area 6 years now.
Nice. And since we're talking about SWANA and notions of community and resources, what was your introduction to the, shall we call it, the wider SWANA community, and how, what has that figured largely in your time here in the Bay Area?
It came by mere chance. I wasn't seeking it out, since I was, again, just kind of trying to find my way. And I remember I was at a show at SF Camerawork, where Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had the show up, and I have a friend through a friend, and turns out she knows him, and this is how we got to talking. And I think there was this instinctual thing of someone who understands these things. And I've been living outside of Egypt for so long, and I think I got used to just translating seriously, my culture and where I come from. So I see myself struggling less because I'm just used to explaining, which is exhausting. But then you find this person where it's even though we're different, Zulfikar is from Pakistan and I'm from Egypt and all these things, but it's just, anyway, and he introduced me to Azin Siraj, and then Targol Misbah, and then there were those moments where him and me and her would be sitting together, and we're just talking about art, and I'm just realizing, wow, this is my community. And so that's, I think I didn't seek it, but it came to me, and when it came to me, it made perfect sense. And then I just found this place where I can just sit down and talk about my struggles, being in San Francisco and being whatever, the art world being very white and all these things, and how to deal with it, and matters of representation and identity, and people where I don't need to, explain because they get it. And I'm I don't know how to deal with it. And both of them having way more experience than I do, I was seeking advice. And, and this is also, I think it was a talk Thargol and others were having in SOX at Southern Exposure, where Sawana came up, and then it was my first time to hear about the efforts of kind of introducing Sawana, as a concept. And it just kind of clicked, and it was just light bulbs going off. And and since then I've been making sure to find, my people and those people, and stick to those people, and seek guidance from them.
It's powerful. That's for sure. It's Zulfi and Azin, as you know them, their forces to be reckoned with. Very much looking forward to speaking with both of them. But I imagine that was a graceful and very welcoming, their metaphorically large embrace into this community. That's I can't think of two better inadvertent ambassadors than those.
I know, and I'm just saying, I wish I had a more interesting story, but it's really just by mere coincidence meeting people and just realizing, because I was also entering, the art scene here, and then all these connections, but then also just finding, it was very specific, and I had to kind of, that makes sense. This is so comfortable. I'd like to be with those people more, And
I don't think it requires I love the story, the simplicity of that story. And I don't necessarily think it means that there is a formality that goes along with it. I think it's an extension of just the generosity of the cultures that we are a part of.
Yeah.
That it's like you welcome your friends no matter where you find them, and bring them into your life, and it's
Yeah.
this sort of seamless. I had a very similar experience to yours as well, which is just how does one with any kind of ties to the Swana region find and participate in community. And it just is like, yeah, it happens through, just as you described it, conversation. And whatever comes of that, it leads to invitations to someone's house or their opening or a poetry reading or whatever that is.
Right.
And the magic of it just seems to unfold in front of us. So it's a singular experience, I think. So
it really is. It really is.
So when Shag was thinking about this project and putting it together, she framed it around the notion of resources, and we've been talking about sort of human connection as a resource, certainly maybe the most profound, but within this notion, or within, as we're thinking about Swana and thinking about resources, like what does that term activate in your thinking? How do you respond to that phrasing, resources?
Well, honestly, I sat down with this and I thought about it, and I'm like, well, maybe that's why Zamin is happening, because if you were someone who's visiting or you just new to the area and you're from the region and you're looking for like-minded people to talk to or ask questions, as far as I know, which says nothing, but as far as I know, there's no place you can go to. There's no, I don't know what you call an institute or a meeting place or like a gallery or a specific art space or even a cultural space that's like I guess you'd find whatever like Arab stuff and Iran, like basically the area kind of broken down, but then it would be a completely different cultural setting than if you're thinking about the arts, and so in terms of resources, I think Zamin hopefully is going to be a resource where people can be like, okay, what's going on in this area in terms of art, who's working, and then they can look it up and then have context. But as far as I know, there isn't resources in the sense of like, as I said, just finding people to talk to who can guide me through issues. Only people from those countries will understand in terms of challenging about how you present and talk about your work and how people are perceiving your work, right?
No, that makes sense. Does it, so it sounds like resources is less of a physical, as you mentioned, like a cultural center or a dedicated art space, or something that is brick and mortar, but maybe in your experience is more defined in human interaction and what that builds out of those initial magical sort of interactions with people. So it sounds like it's not ephemeral, but more based in personal communication.
Because this is what starts things, right? Like I believe, like there is also something tricky about having those physical spaces. They're really good, but then they tend to go one way or the other. They will be heavy, on people who come from a specific politics, meaning mostly, and also in the sense of like even galleries and now everyone, like the awakening of the racial inequality in the world, and you have spaces turning having like monthly themes that think about different cultures, or like shows that are adapting artists from a specific region. So that's kind of there, but what makes it happen if you had people together, because they can submit proposals for shows that think about the specific subject that's interesting for people from the Swana region. You know what I mean? Like I think, and I think this is what starts it. People would come together and maybe start something that could serve, like if this artist from the Swana regions, what do they need? So it would be coming, from the people to the people who really need it, in a very specific way, not in a pre-made, like, oh, it should be a space that does this and does programming, and there are thousands of that.
That absolutely makes sense. And I like you, I like the spontaneity of it, the informality of it, and that it is driven more by human interaction. That is even if I had never met you before, like after this conversation, like I could, if I saw you at an opening, like, oh, here's Ebti, and I get to speak with her, and
Right.
it sort of just grows from there. And it's that, yeah, it's that just that informality of it that is so just nimble and graceful. It's one of the things I love most about it, and
Yeah.
and that it is it that grace sort of seems to run through. It's the strongest, most prominent vein, so to speak, that runs through this community, and that's really, it's a lovely thing. You perfectly described it. Thank you. All right, so our last question: what are you thinking about right now?
In terms of work, I think I'm still trying to figure out what I talked about at the beginning, of how and if language. But then also I'm realizing, because I worked in theater for so long, I specialized specifically in drama and literary translation, specifically young adult fiction. And then in theater, I worked production, and I was, on tour with, anyway, and I played music. I'm just realizing that coming to the art also, like, kind of as a second career, I carrying all these things that I did before, and they're just showing. And
Yeah.
I was, when I started doing photography, I was trying to pretend I've always been a photographer, and I never even said that I was a translator. And now I'm just trying to embrace it, and just seeing, how when everything comes into the work, how it would look like. So I'm not sure how, but I'm very, I started a residency at the Headlands in August, which I'm excited about. So I think it's going to be,
Wonderful.
I think, perfect timing to just sit with all these components, and be like, okay, what am I doing, and how am I doing it? That.
That's very exciting. Congratulations on that. I'm so glad that you will encounter the unique opportunity that is the Headlands, what they make available to artists, and even more connections that you will forge with your peers, with the people, administrators associated with that place, and just that it's a great, I wouldn't say introduction to the art world, but just it's another path into it. And
Yeah.
I'm really glad to know that you'll be there and be so fully supported as you're out there. And when you're ready for a studio visit, let me know, because I would love to come out and see.
Oh, I'd love that. Okay, I'll reach out.
Yeah,
I'll reach out. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
I have another thing that I'm thinking about. Do we have time for it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go for it.
I had to. No, because I've been thinking about identity and how in school, like, I do a lot of personal work. So of course it's identity work, but it's not identity work in that sense. And it's just funny that my work is, mostly like poetic and, kind of not abstract, but kind of, it's not very, it's like sad and poetic. And then it still gets fit into this box, right? And so, and because we are in this group that's coming together beautifully based on identity, so, to me, it's like, okay, is there an escape from this, right? Is there an escape from your work being read outside of me being an Egyptian woman or not? Like, I'm just wondering, right? And then for me, and like with the coming month, I am, okay, maybe let's just lean into it completely, like I am looking at hieroglyphs and I'm like, okay, let's see, if although people expecting identity work from me, they're expecting work about like Muslim women in Egypt. So like for some reason, it's the Arab Muslim identity that people see and not like the ancient Egyptian. And I'm like, okay, maybe throw them a curveball there. But I'm just wondering what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Is there a way ever? And I think I'm so excited maybe to have like a meetup with everyone, right? And then it's like, is there a way? I mean, and maybe people, it's fine if you want to do this type of work. I'm just kind of, it was commented to me that, oh, I'm so surprised that you have like pictures of walls and the ocean and not like veiled women or whatever. And I was like,
yeah,
so
based on your work, like you come from a certain part of the world. There is a shorthand of knowledge in the West about Egyptian women that's, it falls into stereotype, it falls into, it's laced with racism and misogyny, and like, and if we're honest, like bigotry as far as religion is concerned.
Yeah.
But but that you are automatically like lumped into that space, that you can only produce work about these themes and represent it a certain way, it's presumptuous, it's cumbersome. Like just the laboring under that expectation, I imagine, is exhausting. And so the way that you're trying to throw off, you know, all of us as audiences, and doing it with such subtlety is really just lovely. Absolutely lovely. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I mean, you know, I wasn't conscious about it, and I was just doing my thing, right? But then it just kept coming, and then one of my advisors kept telling me, you need to address the elephant in the room. I'm like, and I haven't yet, right? Like I haven't yet. I'm just doing my thing. But you know, I thought this was a good opportunity, just as I know panel discussions are happening, and you know, I'm looking forward to again more conversation, because I don't know what's on everyone's mind, but this is definitely on my mind of like, will I be ever able to escape this definition, you know, this category?
Yeah, the expectation of it. And it's, yeah, and I think I don't have the answer necessarily. I imagine that a way forward is that you are producing the work that is present and interesting, and like that you want to be working on, that you're not fulfilling someone else's expectations or ideas of what your work should be. I mean, and just you know, that there's a whole long screed about what would they expect of a man in this case, but we won't get into that. So more power to you.
Yes.
But thank you so much for your candor and your just everything that you brought. Really, it was such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Like anyway, I'm still very happy and I'm honored, and thank you.
Oh, likewise. All right. We'll see you hopefully in person sometime very soon.
Yes, excited.
Right. Thank you. And thanks to everyone for showing up. We appreciate it. Bye.